issue in Borneo. And it goes back to what I was saying about human populations rising and expanding and then coming into conflict with wild populations. The elephants are really suffering, and as a result, there's only 1,500 elephants left in the wild in Borneo. And these are the kind of stories which Erin continued to look at and to research, these kind of serious issues of human-animal conflict. And now I wanted to talk to you guys briefly about the illegal wildlife trade, as this really has been a key area of focus over the last few years. Four Corners has been working on several stories about the illegal wildlife trade. The illegal wildlife trade is the fourth most lucrative industry in the world. It only comes after arms, drugs, and humans. And we are trading our animals, whether they're live or in their parts, in numerous different ways. And it's really astonishing to see the kind of sometimes quite creative ways in which we're trading our animals, whether it's for traditional medicine, for their parts, for souvenirs, skins, as exotic pets in the wildlife tourism trade. And wildlife tourism has been a particular area of focus that we've been looking at over the last few years. We've been working with World Animal Protection to document the plight of some of these animals in wildlife tourism venues. I would bet that 99% of people in the audience at some point today will have gone to a wildlife tourism venue. Whether that's zoos, elephant rides, camel rides. And the problem is, often people who attend these things don't realize about the cruelty that goes on behind the scenes. They might not question where the animal has come from. And is it being treated in a habitat which is reflective of its natural habitat? One animal that we've been focusing on particularly is the plight of orangutans. Now, orangutans are highly social creatures. They share 97% of their DNA with us. So when we think that we are treating our closest living ancestor like this, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And we know that orangutans experience human emotions like depression, like anxiety, like stress. Here you can see an orangutan lying face down on the floor in a grubby cell in Pata Zoo. Orangutans are arboreal. They spend all of their time in the treetops in the wild. They even sleep in nests that they build in the trees. So to see an orangutan doing this, it really goes to show just how depressed he is. We found a similar scene going on in Vietnam in a zoo. This orangutan just had these two boulders cemented to the floor. That's all he had for stimulation. And day in, day out, he would have to stay here while people are kind of knocking at the glass, trying to get him to pose for a picture. And wildlife tourism is a particularly hard-hitting topic because it's not just a quick end for the animal. It's day in, day out suffering that these animals must face. An orangutan can live up to 50 years. That's half a century of suffering. If we treated humans like this, we would call it torture. And because orangutans are so intelligent, they are being used in a variety of ways for our entertainment. Here's an image which was taken at Bali Zoo. In Bali Zoo, you can pay to have a breakfast experience with orangutans. You can have your buffet breakfast, and you can watch orangutans play, fight. And the thing is, people don't seem to question why the orangutans are here. People don't question, where did these orangutans come from? Were they poached from the wild? Is this habitat ethical? And I think often people don't want to admit to themselves that maybe they're contributing to something which isn't ethical. Bali Zoo, like many other zoos, hides behind the front of conservation. Bali Zoo gives 0.6% of its profits to donate to conservation. Bali Zoo is not for conservation. Bali Zoo is for animal exploitation and for profit. And the same can be said for so-called in-situ wildlife entertainment venues. This is at Bukit Lawang in Sumatra, where you can pay to have an in-the-wild experience with an orangutan, where you visit it in its natural habitat. Sure, this is its natural habitat, but it's been made so artificial by the amount of people that it's no longer reflective of its natural habitat. You get situations now where there's around 70 people crowded around one orangutan, and this is highly stressful for them. So just because a wildlife entertainment venue is in the wild, it doesn't necessarily mean it's an ethical one. And then we have the worst of the worst. This is at Safari World in Bangkok. the orangutans are dressed up in bikinis and forced to dance in a provocative manner twice a day, every day. Orangutans are shy, solitary creatures, so to be forced to do this is highly unnatural when you think about the normal lives that they would experience in the wild. And actually, they would have to be trained using quite brutal methods to be taught how to do this. This, I think, is a particularly powerful shot. Here you can see an orangutan has been dressed in a pink, sexualized bikini. She's incredibly emaciated. Likewise, this shot is too very impactful. This orangutan is about to enter the boxing ring. He'll be forced for a few minutes to battle another orangutan for our entertainment. And I wanted to just draw your attention to those two last photos that I showed you, as those two are one of Erin's most famous photos, and they actually won some categories in the big photography competition. This won a category, the People's Choice category in Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and this one, if I can go back, won a category in Nature Photographer of the Year. And I just wanted to say for a moment about the importance of photography competitions. And I know that there's many photographers in the room, and whether you're a budding photographer or a seasoned veteran, photography competitions can be really important. It's not just an ego boost, and it's not just about improving your own profile, but photography competitions can do a tremendous job for amplifying your campaign. These two images were shown far and wide after winning competitions, and it's just an example of the importance of wildlife photography competitions in terms of amplifying your message. This has been a passion project with the team for the last 3 or 4 years. Blood, sweat, and tears has gone into it. We've really worked our socks off to document the plight of orangutans. And I'm really excited to tell you guys that we've actually turned this into a documentary, and it's in the final stages of a distribution deal. And I'm very excited to be able to share with you the trailer now.
My name is Gekoski. I'm an environmental photojournalist. I've spent the past decade covering human-animal conflict around the world. But now, I'm deep into the most important project I'll ever work on.
There's beatings and cruelty beyond belief and abuse that goes on behind the scenes that the tourists don't know about.
This is a wildlife house of horrors.
Everybody buying a ticket is responsible.
We are gathering momentum. This project has morphed from a mission into a movement.
He has an international network. Even some officials have been arrested within this case.
I had no idea where this would lead me or how big it would become.
The eyes of orangutan always coming before I go to bed, and still remind me that I have to work harder and harder to let them out from the cages.
It's great to see that there actually is hope here.
However, this is just the beginning. Together, we can raise the red flag and stop this cycle of abuse.
I think we're having a few tech difficulties, so I apologize. But that is our latest documentary, which is coming out soon. As I say, we are in the late stages of a distribution deal, and I'm really excited to be able to say that that will be released soon. So if you want to find out when that's going to be released, please follow us on our social media channels, which I'll share at the end. So now moving on to something a bit lighthearted, and please bear with, I'm sorry you can currently only see half the image. What have we got here? This might be a slightly familiar scene to some of you guys. These are goats which live in the trees in Morocco. A seemingly enchanting, naturally occurring story where the goats will, of their own accord, climb into the trees and stay there. People think this is adorable, and of course they want to have their selfie shot with them. And when you do some closer inspection, it turns out that this story isn't actually quite what it seems. These goats don't stay in there all day of their own accord. In fact, the farmers will actually they'll build platforms for the goats to stay in, and they'll be forced to stay up there all day, every day, with no water, no food. And some of these goats are very skinny, and they're extremely emaciated. But as tourists, we think that this is adorable. We think this is so cool, and obviously we want to have our photo taken with them. So if there was going to be any kind of take-homes of this seminar, it would be, if you see an animal being exploited in a wildlife tourism venue, I would just ask you to question where the animal has come from. Is someone making money here? And this is just another example of the way that we're abusing animals in wildlife tourism venues. It's not just happening in Asia. Oh, we're back now. It's not just happening in Asia and Africa too. In Europe also, animals are being exploited in wildlife tourism venues. In Germany, you can watch an elephant in a circus. In France, they use bears and wolves in medieval circuses. In Spain, you can have your photo taken with a tiger. And in the Czech Republic, we discovered lions being used in circuses. This is the lives that they'll live when they perform. Essentially, a trainer will go around whacking them and forcing them to jump up and roar. And this is how they will stay for the rest of their lives. And if you consider the natural habitat of a lion in a safari with hundreds of miles to roam, it really bears no resemblance. This is what we're doing to our animals. And now, I wanted to talk to you guys briefly about the exotic pet trade, as this is another way that we've been exploiting our wild populations for our entertainment. Millions of animals are stolen from the wild every year to cater for our demand to have something cool and exciting as a pet. And there's numerous reasons why it's bad to have exotic pets. It's very difficult to meet their basic needs in a domestic environment. They might not have enough space. They're often kept in these small cages. They're handled too much, which is really stressful for them. And it's very difficult to give the correct nutrition to an animal in a domesticated environment. Essentially, it goes without saying that wild animals are not domesticated. They don't crave human contact in the same way that, say, dogs or cats do. So it causes them immense stress. And often the desire to have an exotic pet doesn't come out of a deep respect for the animal. It more comes from the desire to have something cool or exotic that we can show off to our friends. And one animal that has been particularly at risk to this has been the otter. We've been working with World Animal Protection to create 2 feature-length documentaries on some keystone species which are targeted as exotic pets. One of them is otters. Now, I think you'll all agree otters are adorable. They're cute, they're charismatic. You might have even seen photos of 2 otters holding hands as they lie down in the river so they don't float away from each other. All of this gives the illusion that they might make good pets, but they don't. And social media has been a real driving force in perpetuating this narrative that otters make good pets. This is actually a famous otter who has 500,000 followers. And if you type in otters of Instagram into Instagram and you scroll down on your feed, you'll see tons of images of cute otters, dressed in human clothes or stuffing pellets into its mouth. And all of this gives the illusion that they make good pets, but they don't. All the owners that we interviewed along the way were so broken by the experience. They had these Tasmanian devil things running around their apartments, urinating on their things and breaking their stuff. They have these lightning-fast metabolisms. They need to eat 1/4 of their body weight every day. So they're really expensive to look after. They're noisy. They're smelly. They make bad pets. But regardless of whether they make good pets for us or not, we make really bad owners. And this is the scene from the inside of a pet otter cafe, which is a craze in Tokyo. Kind of follows the same sort of rule as a cat cafe. And as you can see, these environments are really not reflective of the natural habitat an otter would have in the wild. These places are noisy, they're smelly, they're handled too much, just so people can get their social media shot. Okay, let's have a quick raise of hands. Who here has been to a zoo? Nice. Who here has seen an animal pacing in a zoo? Okay, that is called zoochosis. And zoochosis refers to when an animal is in a stressful situation and it will display a repetitive behavior over and over. It might be a tiger pacing back and forth, an elephant swaying, or in this case, it's an otter who's bitten off half of his tail. They do this out of stress. So essentially, we have this situation with otters where social media is perpetuating the narrative that they make good pets. People across Japan and Asia desire them as pets. They're stolen from the wild. Their parents are killed in the process. They're sold onto the black market, and they'll make their way into someone's living room as a pet or a pet otter cafe like this. Also, people can have that perfect Instagram shot. Now, the team have worked really hard on this investigation. We've uncovered transnational trafficking routes where otters are bought and sold on the black market. And I'm really excited to say that this is a feature-length documentary which will be shown in the screening room. But now I'm excited to share with you the trailer.
What we've seen over the past few years is an increase in the amount of otter cafes that have popped up in Japan.
And this otter has actually gnawed off part of its tail. And if that's not a sign of a distressed otter, then I don't know what is. One of the things that you notice here is the stench. It absolutely stinks.
Their behavior is wild. They're not like cats and dogs.
Without access to water, without access to proper nutrition, and without access to the enrichment that they normally have in the wild environment, it is a life of suffering.
So they're a breeder
Yes.
in Indonesia, and then you buy the otters from Indonesia,
Yes.
and they send them to Japan.
Any kind of animal they can provide here. Yeah, if the price is right.
They've been taken away from their mother, and now someone is trying to sell them essentially to a complete stranger.
He's a buyer.
He has exported otters before.
Yes, exported, not just otter, any animal.
And you can call me Farah.
交通事故にあって海の底に沈められてそれは分からないですよね。なぜならものすごいお金だからです。
I've gone off. Oh, but we're back. So as I say, that full documentary will be shown in the screening room, as well as our other documentary that we've made about the python pet trade. Both really interesting stories, so I hope that you take the time to check out the full versions. I just wanted to end off by talking about over-exploitation, as this really has been a recurring theme that we've come across over and over again during our plight to document issues of human-animal conflict. Essentially, it's become glaringly obvious that the way that we're interacting with our natural world is unsustainable. We're harvesting wild species at rates far faster than they can recover. And this happens in many ways. We've seen wildlife trade, exotic pets, wildlife tourism, but also in bushmeat, overfishing and poaching. And one area of overexploitation that I just wanted to draw your attention to now is the wet market, as this has come under scrutiny in the last year. This image was taken in a wet market in Jakarta, where amazingly, you can still buy a bat. Bats are reservoirs for exotic diseases, as we've seen this year. And also, just as a side note, this photo, I think, You'll agree, and Bertie will agree, that it's not Bertie's best work, but sometimes in photojournalism, something happens in front of you, and you should always take the shot. You know, the lighting isn't perfect here, the rules of composition aren't really being followed, but photojournalism is about telling a story. If you've got a phone and you've got social media, you have the power to be a photojournalist. And scenes like this are common in wet markets. And if you look at scenes like this, it really is amazing that this pandemic hasn't happened sooner. We've got numerous different species of animal all stacked on top of each other in the baking, sweltering heat, where they'll be sold off to in their various industries, whether as pets for their meat or traditional medicine. 75% of new diseases come from animals. So when you look at scenes like this, really, it's amazing that this pandemic hasn't happened sooner. One animal that we often come across is the civet. Who here has heard of civet coffee? Give us a show of hands if you have. Have you tried it? No? Well, I have, and it doesn't taste that different from normal coffee, I don't think. But essentially, I just wanted to draw your attention to this example, as this is really an example of the gruesome ways that we sometimes exploit our wild animals. Civets will be force-fed coffee beans because it's thought that their excretions will make a purer, less acidic version of coffee. It's just an example of the kind of weird, grotesque ways that we're abusing our animals now. I just wanted to end on this photo. This was taken at a voodoo market in Benin, in West Africa, where we went when we were filming our pythons documentary. And his face really tells the story that I want to tell. The people who are working in close proximity to our wild species and often killing them are not monsters. This boy has been taught by his father to do the work that he does, and he'll spend all day selling heads which will be used for voodoo. Voodoo also has gone on for thousands of years. It's very difficult for us as Westerners to point fingers and say, because of your religion, that's the problem here. No. These issues are complex, and I hope that I will spend the rest of my career trying to unpick some of them. So why should we protect wildlife? Selfishly, we need it. Our ecosystem services are hugely important economically. We can't take entire species out of the ecosystem and not affect that this will have knock-on effects on us and our livelihoods and the livelihoods of our family. Now that we understand science better and the sentience of animals, we know that animals feel pain. So it's morally wrong that we're using and abusing them in this way. And is this the legacy we'll leave our grandchildren? We are currently contemplating a world without manta rays, without elephants, without great white sharks. Are we going to sit there and say to our grandchildren, yeah, that happened on our watch, sorry? Will these species be confined only to photography books? We are the last generation who have the power to turn this around and save what is left of our world's wildlife. And we must do. Because once it's gone, it will be lost forever. Thank you very much for coming. Cool. Thanks so much for coming, and I hope that that wasn't too depressing. I know that some of those images have been quite hard-hitting. If you'd like to understand more about any of these issues, please come and talk to me. I'll be by the ANIMOSITY exhibition for the next few days, and please follow the links that I've shared too if you'd like to find out more. And once again, I wanted to say thank you so much to the organisers. You guys have done a cracking job, and this is probably the most difficult exposure you'll ever have to organise. So you've done an amazing job, and thank you so much for having us. Thank you.